Once again, welcome. The purpose of this group is to provide a space for you to share your concerns and triumphs, to find the support you need around best practice developmentally appropriate child care. We hope that your families and ultimately the children in your care benefit from the ideas shared here. Please know that although that we are here to give any support we can, 4C for Children does not endorse any of the specific ideas or policies shared here today. Today's session is a collaboration between 4C for Children, SWOAEYC and OCCRRA. We are grateful for our partnership and thrilled to be able to come together to bring you important information about Ohio Child Care Stabilization subgrants. We're all Southwest Ohio Association of Education of Young Children, SWOAEYC, is a state-level affiliate of the National Association for the Education of Young Children, serving Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton, and 16 surrounding counties. SWOAEYC advocates for the needs and rights of young children, promotes professional development in the field of early childhood education. We're joined today by the Executive Director of SWOAEYC, Chad Nunemaker. I want to welcome Chad.
Great, thanks, Archer, and hello, everyone. My name is Chad, as Archer said, and I'm the Executive Director for SWOAEYC. And Archer did a great job doing an overview of our organization. We are a state-level NACCE affiliate. We serve Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton, and 16 surrounding counties. And we do a lot of work with NAYC to help extend our member benefits and encourage the growth and engagement of early childhood professionals with the early childhood field. So if you'd like to get more involved with the field, engaging with a professional organization is a great way to do that. And we are your professional organization if you are in Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, or one of these surrounding counties. We do have an active board. If you're interested in getting involved with our board of directors, we're really looking for board members who are committed to our mission and vision, who can volunteer time for board and committee meetings and work, who have skills and interests that would support the association, and who are passionate about the early childhood profession. So if this sounds like you, then please be sure that you are on our mailing list and that you follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'll have some links in the chat in just a minute here. And just keep your eye out for a call for nominations during mid to late 2022. If you're not quite ready for a board position, but you still want to get involved, we do have several active committees, including the Equity Committee, the Finance and Fundraising Committee, Public Policy Committee, and Programs and Events Committee. We also have a new committee this year called Early Learning Leaders. This is a committee that is perfect for directors, administrators, principals, or other leaders in early childhood programs. And if you're interested in joining one of those committees, then please be sure to get in contact with us via email. You can email us at info@swoaec.org. That's info@swoaeyc.org. And we have several really exciting upcoming events this year. Already this year, we've had two great events. First was our Early Childhood Awards ceremony, of which 4C was a sponsor. So thank you again for that. And right now we're engaged in the Public Policy Forum, where we are engaging with federal legislators on issues related to early childhood education. In fact, we just had our meeting with Senator Sherrod Brown's office yesterday. We also have some other events coming up this year, events surrounding Week of the Young Child, events surrounding the National Black Children Development Week. We also are planning to put together a summer training institute focused on DAP and assessment with a training that was created by NAUIC. We also plan on doing an exchange reflection session on race and racism in early childhood education. We also will be starting this year a DAP book club exploring the newest 4th edition of developmentally appropriate practice. And we're going to have some ongoing conversations surrounding equity. So if you're interested in getting involved with us or staying in tune with us on when are these events happening, please be sure to engage with us. You can join our mailing list. You can like us on Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter. I've got the links in the chat for you there. You can also contact us via email at info@swoaec.org. So that's all from me. Thanks again to 4C and to OCCRRA. And that's it from me. Thanks, Archer.
Thank you, Chad. But before we get started, we know that we've got a lot of information that we're going to have come out, and you're going to have questions. So as questions come, I don't think that we're going to handle them right at the moment. Please put your questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end. So today's presentation will be presented by Judith Santmeyer. Judith is the Chief Operating Officer for OCCRRA. OCCRRA provides professional development and technical assistance to early childhood, child serving, and school-age programs and professionals, along with support to providers, parents, and the community. Please welcome Judith and thank her so very much for joining us today to share information about the stabilization grant.
Thank you,
All yours,
Archer.
Judith. Yep.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about the child care stabilization grants and specifically diving deeper into the reconciliation piece. There's definitely some of the items that we've already talked about in prior webinars that will kind of lead in. We'll also talk a little bit about phase 2 and phase 3, but reconciliations are really what we're going to hit harder today. The background for these funds, the stabilization grants are made available through the American Rescue Plan Act, or what you hear is called ARPA. There were 2 approval processes to provide us with the funds that we have. The first one for phase 1 was through the Ohio Controlling Board. And then for phase 2 and forward was House Bill 169. The Department of Job and Family Services is the funding organization, and OCCRRA is the administrative organization. So we're handling the pieces around the application, the payment issuance, as well as the reconciliation process for each phase. So we currently,
Judith, I'm sorry. Your PowerPoint's showing up very big.
Oh.
I don't know if you could probably can't see that.
I cannot.
So we're not seeing all of everything.
It's only part of the page, huh?
Well, we don't see everything left of phase 1. It's cutting off some of the lettering, and then it's cutting off half of the top of it. There we go. Perfect.
I don't know what I did, but if it works now, we'll go with that.
It looks great now.
Okay. All right. Well, if for some reason it seems to go wonky on us again, please let us know.
Thank you.
No problem. So in phase 1, we have that opened on December 1st of 2021. That application period runs through May 31st, and then phase 2 started on February 1st and will also run through May 31st of 2022. The applications are available on your organization dashboard. If you have not opened an application yet, you will see the phase 1 application first, and then it'll proceed to that once you provide a reconciliation. So at this point in time, you won't likely see both phases because it's set up to be one at a time. When we take a look then at the grant allocation formula, some things to keep in mind is it is based on program type. So when you look at the charts that are available for that, finding what type of program you are, and then that determines as well the sub-grant eligibility, because not all sub-grants are available to all program types. And then if you are a center or ODE serving publicly funded children, the licensing capacity then comes into play. So for phase 1, it's license capacity as of November 28th, 2021, and then for phase 2 as of January 28th, 2022. When we take a look at the application requirements, much of which, if you haven't already seen this information, it's been pre-populated for you. So some of the items like your license number, your program name, it didn't make sense to have you enter that again because we already have it in the system. So we were able to enter those information in the form for you. The applicant demographic information is very important. The federal government is requiring this information for all the grants that are administered. So it's asking for things like race, ethnicity. So we have to collect that information. Now, if it's already in your OPR profile, it will bring it forward, but it does allow you to answer those questions in the application. Also in the application, we start to see the use of this terminology around maximum funding amount and requested funding amount. And so they work slightly different between phase 1 and phase 2. So in phase 1, you are provided a maximum funding amount for each sub-grant. So depending on your program type, it will tell you how much you have available to you for operating, workforce recruitment and retention, and access development. In the application, it will then ask you what your requested funding amount is. It could be equal to the maximum funding amount, an amount less than if you don't believe you'll spend the entire amount provided, or if you need to waive a sub-grant because maybe you're not able to complete an activity in that sub-grant, you can enter 0. In phase 2, it works slightly different. So providing programs more flexibility around these funds, you're provided a maximum lump sum funding amount, meaning that it's $1 amount, and you're going to tell us through that requested funding amount how you want to allocate that among the sub-grants. You don't have to use all of the sub-grants. You could put all of the money into one sub-grant, but the program, based on their business need, is telling us how that works. And then the completion of the payment portal, or what's listed as the payment method. So that area where you're putting your bank account information, giving us tax ID information, that only has to be completed one time. So if you've completed that already for phase 1, you won't be asked to do that again in future phases, but we just need to establish that. You are able, if for some reason you need to edit that information, you can do that in your org dashboard under the payments tab. So that's a newer tab for folks, so we want to make sure that you understand that that's available. It is only available to edit once your vendor ID is out of pending. So if you submit it right away and realize, oh, maybe I made a mistake, or I need to change something that I've submitted, it's only after a vendor ID gets established that you're able to make that edit. So just want to make sure folks understand that as well. So when we take a look at the phase 1 sub-grant activities, we have 3 sub-grants: operating new pandemic costs, workforce recruitment and retention, and access development. In operating new pandemic costs, we have multiple activities to pick from there. So you can pick from personnel costs, ongoing costs, facility maintenance and renovations, and personal protective equipment. And so while you're in the application, it will ask you to pick the ones that you believe you will have expenses for. Our federal government is requiring us to identify these items as well as report on them, on what gets selected. And so that's why you'll hear us talk about if we have to change an activity, there's a process to that because of the level of detail that we have to provide in our federal reporting. When we have our sub-grant activities, we have guidance documents to help you through what are allowable items. So the manual procedure letter is one place to find that information. Our reconciliation, as well as the application guidance documents, provide a list of expenses as well as examples of the types of reconciliation supporting documentation that would be needed for those. One item that has an additional component is if you utilize the funds for the retention bonus in the workforce recruitment and retention subgrant. In the manual procedure letters, it provides guidance around if you're using the funds for this purpose, having a policy as well as an employee agreement that, and it provides particular information about what to include in those items. If you're going to use the funds for that purpose. For our retention bonuses, they can be used for all staff, and that is the same for all personnel costs in operating and workforce recruitment and retention. So we have been getting some questions here recently. Is it only for new staff? Is there limitations on that operating workforce recruitment and retention about the type of staff or when they started? And there is not. All staff are available for that. When we get into access development, this is a little bit more specific. And so there's 3 areas that you have to be doing these items to use the list of expenses that are included with them. So the first one is around increasing classrooms and operating hours, and the increasing classrooms is around infant, toddler, school age, and children with special needs. And then operating hours that would be beyond, some non-traditional hours would be included in that. So if you are doing those activities, then the list of expenses that are available under that are allowable for you. For technology access for learning and development, that is another area that the technology is specifically for the purpose of learning and development. We get a lot of questions about, I need computers for office use, I need computers for administrator use, and that is not included in that section given that definition. Next, we have addressing school age learning gaps and social emotional needs. So this one too is very age group specific. So we're looking at school age group, and the goods and services needed around addressing the learning gaps and social emotional needs, which is also a very specific activity in regards to that age group. So I say that because I think some folks are getting confused with, well, I want to spend funds for one of the expenses listed there, but I'm not doing that activity. And so you have to be doing the activity to use the funds in that way. Okay. So when we look at allowable expenses, there's the pieces I've talked about. So the activities that you're selecting. The other important piece around allowable expenses is when the expenses occur. So in phase 1 and all of the phases, it provides specific dates for each of the subgrants when the expenses have to occur. So for operating new pandemic costs, this is the only one that's a going back concept. So this starts from January 31st, 2020 through June 30th of 2022. So those items around personnel costs, rent, mortgage, utilities, those items, you can select months that are prior to now, have that documentation say, yes, I'm going to claim for the months of February 2020 through April of 2020, and that's how much that is. Workforce recruitment and retention, as well as access development, are going forward. So they start with the opening of the application, which was December 1st of 2021 through June 30th of 2022. As I mentioned in the application, you have to select these activities of how you want to use the funds. And so this piece becomes important because as we move into our reconciliation, the activities that you have selected will pre-populate into the reconciliation. When we take a look at grant payments and tracking, so currently we are approximately 4 to 6 weeks from the application approval date. So that's been an important date to note. You can see that in your organization dashboard when the approval date is. It's not based on the submitted date. You can also see when a payment has been processed. So again, looking in the organization dashboard, the payments tab, and you click on that, you'll be able to see if payments have been sent and a date that they have been sent. For EFTs, it's the date that it's been processed or sent to the bank. It is not always the date that you see it in your bank account because we can't control that. We can tell you when we send it to your bank, but we can't control when your bank posts it to your account. And then the date of a check is when that check is issued. So when it's physically printed. With the checks, then you have mailing time that would be included in that as well. So just to give you an idea of where to find particular items that help you through this process. When we take a look at non-allowable expenses, these are related to you can't use the funds in this way from the allowable expenses. So you can't purchase a new program with these funds. You can use the funds for facility maintenance and improvements, but that can't be for construction or major renovations. And so to find what that definition is for major renovations, if you look on page 8 of the reconciliation guidance document, this section that I've just pulled for this slide about non-allowable items includes the definition from the feds about major renovations. And so it talks about structural changes. And so those pieces, again, are not allowable in this case. So also included are non-allowable expenses around gift cards, gift certificates. So, and I do want to bring this up because I recently saw a post about some training gift certificates that I saw from one of our major training providers. And so gift certificates, gift cards are not allowable expenses with these funds. Reason being is we are not able to track once the purchase occurs when that gift card or gift certificate has a zero balance. There is no way for us to track all of that potential activity. So the feds have said, no, you're not able to utilize that because their definition would be that when the gift card has no more value is when it's spent. So we're not able to utilize that as a payment method. We typically see that around when we were doing pandemic support payment grants around the concept of professional incentives. You would also see that in this section that's not allowed, as well as the gas card. So if you're paying for transportation costs for someone, you can't use a gas card to do that either. Also, since we are looking again at technology access for learning and development, we are not able to utilize gaming systems and their accessories with these funds. So I'm going to pause there for a moment to see if there's any questions from the slides I've presented pressing before we dive deeper into that reconciliation piece.
Someone asked, do I need to apply for phase 1 before I can apply for phase 2 or 3?
Yes, you do. It'll go in order. If for some reason you want to waive a portion of phase 1, it allows you to do that so that you can continue to move forward. But we encourage everyone to apply for all the funds that they're able to spend.
Okay. Multiple people have got concerns. They haven't gotten their money yet, and they're concerned that with the other phase ending May, they want to make sure they get all the money and be able to spend the money, and then also be able to get everything done for phase 2 as well.
Sure. So what we send out payments daily. We're on a brief pause waiting for some funds from JFS, which we received the end of last week. So we're continuing to push payments out. One thing I would have folks kind of work on as you're waiting for a payment is if there are items around that operating that are going back, that you can be collecting those items, getting that ready so that when those funds do arrive, then it's only for the purchases that you need to make to round that out.
Someone asked if there's flexibility between the sub-grants. They want to know whether or not, the example is, if I need more money than I designated for access development, can I move the operating money from that other sub-grant?
Not in phase 1.
Okay.
So phase 1 is very limited to those maximum funding amounts for each sub-grant. Now in phase 2, it's just one lump sum, and you're going to tell us how you want to allocate it across the sub-grants.
Okay. Someone asked for where we can find the slides, and I directed them to the website. A family childcare wanted to know whether or not a smart TV would be an allowable expense under technology accessing for learning development for using like alphabet, phonics, and things like that.
Yes, only for the learning and development piece. One thing to keep in mind around the technology is that developmentally appropriate practices as well. So making sure that's in play.
Okay. And then someone asked about, they've got trouble with a leaking roof. Is that something that would be allowable?
That would be included in the non-allowable, and they can see the reference to roof in that on page 8 of the reconciliation guidance document, where it's talking about the major renovations.
I'll read it all because I'm not really sure.
Sure.
Prior to knowing about this funding, we have approved a stay bonus that requires an employee to be hired no later than 1/1/22 and work through the end of the school year. So 5/20/22. Is there a way to get reimbursed for this bonus, even though it's not 6 months? Does that make sense? Or should I just send it to you directly?
If you could send that to me, because I think there
will.
might be a couple of items related to that, because I just want to
Okay.
make sure we get the dates lined up with when
Okay.
the expenses would have to happen, as well as that 6-month piece.
Okay. Once you've submitted your reconciliation paperwork, how long does it take before you get the answer? So you apply for phase 2 so that we can apply for this phase 2 application?
You do not need to wait for an approval status on your reconciliation to apply for phase 2. It's just a matter of submitting the reconciliation. You should be able to see, once you've submitted your reconciliation, in the application chart of the application tab, it should say add February 2022 application.
Can you purchase items for the school age program and some technology to utilize the Access Development Grant?
So that the first part was that saying that they wanted to utilize the technology for the school age group?
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yes, that would be allowable.
Okay. Is shipping costs from invoice from Best Buy for iPads claimable?
Yes, so things related to taxes that you may need to pay for the items you're getting, shipping would be included in the cost of the item.
Then they also asked about getting like an Alexa or some other kind of similar device to play during sleep time.
We would
cleanup
not
time.
approve an Alexa, no.
Okay. Will payroll for the SBA loan be allowable?
No.
Okay. Would a driveway or an entrance porch be an allowable thing?
So I would have them take a look at the major
Mhm.
renovation piece, because there could be some structural aspects to that.
Okay. Can you submit phase 1 reconciliation while you wait for funds?
Yes, and we'll get into the reconciliation. It sounds like we're kind of leaning that way.
Yep.
So I have a few more slides about that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Archer.
Yep.
All right, so reconciliations. We're looking at one reconciliation per phase, including any additional applications that may have occurred. So it is possible that you can have more than one application as long as you don't exceed the maximum funding amount. So for example, let's say initially, maybe you waived a particular subgrant, but as it turns out, you can actually utilize those funds for the activity provided. So you apply for that additional subgrant. So you'd then have 2 applications. But this is saying that we're going to take those 2 applications and create one reconciliation at the end of the phase. These are also site specific. So if you're working in a multi-site program, your application and your reconciliation are site specific. The reconciliation is going to pre-populate with the activities from the application. So when and I'll go back. So it's going to pre-populate with those activities. And then what we'll find later is that you're not able to enter a 0 for an activity, because by adding it to your application, we're approving the fact that you're moving forward with that activity. If you find that you need to remove an activity because you don't end up having an expense there, There is a process to do that. We ask that you send an email to support@OCCRRA.org with your license number so that application can be reopened and that corrected before your reconciliation. I would say to complete that process, wait until you receive your payment, just so that we don't have any crossover with that, and then complete that process for the reconciliation. Also important is the expense period, like we've talked about, based on the subgrant. So we have found that folks are getting a little confused on that. And so the subgrants provide a range of time that you need to have the expense occur in. And so make sure that you kind of have, and we have the charts and the guidance documents to help you through that, but it will be helpful as you're looking at that. There is an overlap from phase 1 and phase 2. And so clearing that up as well, folks have questioned, well, if I say I'm using personnel in phase 1, does that mean I can't use it in phase 2? And that is not correct. You can use all of the activities and all of the phases. We just can't have the same, in the case of, for example, personnel, we can't have the same employee, the same pay period applied to both phases. So an example would be utilizing March 2022 payroll. We can't see the documentation and have it live in the phase 1 reconciliation and then turn around and see it in phase 2, because that would be kind of that double dipping concept. So that's what that's saying there. For our family childcare, there's certain expenses, and I'm thinking of things related to like facility maintenance, that the time space percentage may apply there. So I'd have folks take a look at that. One example, if you think of it, it would be the concept of flooring. Let's say that you're replacing carpet in the entire house. You would only use the time space percentage for the portion that's used for childcare in an example. If you're only replacing the flooring in those areas where childcare is provided, then you could use the entire amount because it's not based on a whole house purchase. Also is this concept of unused versus unspent funds. So if you look on page 2 of the reconciliation guidance document, it provides definitions for what these mean. The concept around unused funds is that if you didn't request them in your application, you didn't receive them because they weren't essentially drawn down, you don't have to reconcile for the unused funds. The unspent funds is that they have been requested and received. So you put those in your requested amounts, but you don't have the expense in the reconciliation to show that you've spent them. So it's when we have unspent funds, those would be the times when we have to repay funds if you can't show that you've spent them. So that becomes important when we dive into the expense report, and we'll talk more about that. Also, we've already mentioned today that the reconciliation for the first phase needs to be submitted. Again, it does not need to be approved, just submitted before accessing funding for future phases. So in this case, phase 2, this will also be the same moving forward. So you'll have to reconcile phase 2 before phase 3 and so forth. So then we're getting into the reconciliation activities. So there are 2 activities. The first one is the expense report, and all programs complete the expense report. The expense report is a subtotal of the expenses by activity. It should be based on actual amounts spent, not estimates. We ask that you do not round these dollar amounts because we have to reconcile to the federal government to the penny. So we need that information from programs as well. You can, when you're entering the amounts that you have paid, you can enter an amount greater than the grant amount. So let's say, just for easy math, the sub-grant amount was $1,000. Your documentation supports $1,200. You can enter the $1,200, and we ask that you do that because if you're selected for a desk review and the documentation shows $1,200, it's going to be very easy for us to match that up. I will say that the system will stop its calculating at the $1,000 because that was the amount of the sub-grant. So I just will let you know that, because as you enter that dollar amount, the calculation will stop at the sub-grant amount. A $0 amount cannot be entered for an activity. So if you find that you do not have expenses for an activity, that you go through the process to remove the activity, entering a $1 amount, as in a $1, we'll have to look at the documentation associated with that. So please, if you need to remove those, email support@OCCRRA.org and we can help you through that process. Also, one more item on the concept of rounding. There are items, and I completely understand that are whole dollar amounts. So let's use, for example, background checks. Whatever you're paying for a background check, likely it is a whole dollar amount. So it can be entered that way, but it's when we're reviewing the whole expense report and we see that all of those items are rounded. That's when we typically know, okay, that may not be correct. So in the concept that we've talked about unspent funds, if you go through that expense report and the amounts entered are less than the sub-grant amounts, at the bottom where you have the check boxes before you have to electronically sign it, there will be a bullet that talks about the balance of funds. So if you see that bullet and there's a dollar amount there, that tells us a couple things to work through. So one is, if you think, wait a minute, I shouldn't have a balance from what I entered, I'd have you double check the entry field to make sure that goes to 0. If you do find, well, I need to, I have a balance, that would be a repayment. And so we do address the concept of a repayment in the reconciliation guidance document if you can't find additional expenses that would be allowable and in that time period. So if you have questions there, let us know. So again, expense reports, that's all programs. The next one is the reconciliation desk review, and that is only 20% of programs get selected. So a desk review is a concept that we need to review all of the documentation that support the amounts claimed on the expense report. So what happens is when you submit, your program will be notified if you're selected for a desk review. If you are, we ask you go back into the expense report at the bottom of that page. An uploader will appear so that you can upload the documentation for those amounts. The fourth bullet there about the labeling is key. I would even go a step further and say, the concept of giving us a map of that is helpful. And I don't mean literally drawing us a map, but the concept of, some folks have done a great job about, these 3 receipts are, tied to operating personnel. And so they number them so that we can kind of be on the same page as we're going through that information. That is really helpful and typically reduces the number of questions that we need to pose and the potential for going back and forth to getting it resolved. If you can share with us kind of what those pieces are. The other piece around facility maintenance is, there's things in there around, playgrounds, and that would include items about fencing. And so if you're buying items for fencing, I think of kind of those major box stores, right? So kind of the Lowe's, Home Depot. If you've ever seen one of their receipts, they're not really descriptive of helpful. It doesn't say, yes, you're buying items for a fence. It's usually whatever measurement of wood that might be utilized is listed there, how many pieces you purchased. So labeling those items that, yes, that was for the fence repair that I made, that type of maintenance piece will be helpful to us for sure if you're selected for a desk review. If we find through that desk review process that an item is deemed unallowable, our team will work with you to see if there is an item that can be replaced, one that fell within that time frame, of course, and that is allowable, so that can be switched out. So looking into the documentation for these expenses, again, the documentation must be provided if selected for a desk review. If you would like to see the examples of the items that we would be looking for, it's included in the application guidance document as well as the reconciliation guidance document for the different types of expenses. This slide provides us with some general definitions. So expense documentation includes documents from a third-party vendor for goods or services that shows order and payment information. So I will say this becomes important around the concept of, let's say many people utilize Amazon. But depending on the screen provided by Amazon, one meets this definition, one does not. So one is more of a shipping document that will just say, yes, these items were in the box. Well, that does not provide us on typically doesn't provide us the amounts for each item, doesn't say it was paid by, a credit card. It doesn't provide all of the information. There are other pieces that Amazon does provide that does share all of that. It'll say this is the item. It even sometimes, depending on, gives you a picture of the item and says it was this much, and then it adds all of that together, shows you what the tax was if you're in that case, and it was paid by this item. That is the level of detail that we need to see. Examples include, but are not limited to, receipts, purchase orders with payment information if your organization uses a purchase order system, paid invoices, and also that something that varies depending on the setting is the concept of how payroll, those personnel costs get documented. So if your organization is utilizing a third-party payroll company, you would have reports like payroll journals to share. If your organization completes that process internally, it might look like paycheck stubs and timesheets to show that the time was worked and this is how we paid. If in a family childcare environment, it will also be documenting, I worked this many hours in a time frame, and then a check that you might write to yourself that says, yes, it was for this and the time frame worked. So again, showing both sides of that entry. We've already talked about the labeling, and obviously we've put it on a couple slides, so we keep reiterating that as well. And then if you're working with multiple sites, it is possible to provide information. Bulk purchasing typically is an example of that. If you're buying paper towels, allocating that around to the multiple sites, we just need to understand what that allocation is and clearly say, program A received this, program B, so that we can see that level of detail. So when we take a look then at phase 2 and 3, we have a manual procedure letter that guides that. It was approved through the legislative appropriation, as I mentioned, through House Bill 169. We've already talked about that application window. It's similar to phase 1, but there are some refinements. So when we're looking at these phases, there's additional funds for program type. The programs, as we've mentioned, select the amount of funds for each subgrant. So that's where you're entering that requested amount. And then the recruitment activities was added as an activity in the workforce recruitment and retention subgrant. So what this is as we're looking at needing to, let's say, post a position on maybe Indeed or a job board, sometimes there are fees associated with doing that activity. And so that would be included in recruitment. If you're attending a job fair and there's expenses related to that, that would be a recruitment activity. So those are the pieces that are included there. Also in phase 2, it adds mental health supports. So in a couple of areas. One area is in access development, and it's specifically around the expansion or development of a therapeutic childcare. That particular one is a pilot in our state and with our partner, the Ohio Children's Alliance. That particular one, as well as one that you'll see in the new subgrant, which is the mental health workforce and family support section, the mental health bridge. Those two pilots, programs need to be selected to participate in those pilots. It is not, unfortunately, a situation right now where it's like, well, that sounds interesting. I want to learn more about that and do that. There are processes and procedure already in play with those that if you aren't already selected through that process, odds are, that's not going to be a part of that work. So I just give folks a heads up because we have reached out to some programs that were a little confused by that and selected them, but they weren't really a part of that pilot process. For centers, that mental health, workforce, and family support section is in play in phase 2. Again, the mental health bridge is one of those items. Since that is a limited pilot, there are multiple other items that are included in that section. That too works very similarly as access development. And I say that because there are expense items listed in that section, but it's specific around that concept of those mental health supports. So you need to be doing the mental health supports to be able to have those expenses listed there. There is also an additional certification for personal protective equipment. So that's at the bottom of the application in phase 2. It's the check boxes. There's one more checkbox that wasn't there in phase 1. And it talks about the personal protective equipment and that if you're utilizing the funds in that way, that the purchases of those items, the items selected were approved by OSHA, and there's a whole statement about what that is. So I just want folks to be aware of that because that language was also included in House Bill 169, and we did not have it in play in phase 1. So as we are wrapping up some items here, again, on our website, we have all of these resources available to you. I today have been diving very deep in that reconciliation guidance document, as well as referencing the reconciliation user guide. So those will be very helpful as you're walking through this process. The user guide is that screenshot view of the OPR. So it tells you where to find the reconciliation, the screenshots of the different pages that you'll see as you're walking through that process, and provides that level of detail in those instructions. We're going to open it up for questions here, but if there are questions after the webinar today, we ask that you email support@OCCRRA.org. We have a team of folks that review those and respond. We also have agreements with our regional child care resource and referral agencies across the state to help programs through this process. If you have not completed your phase 1 application or it's in draft mode, odds are the resource and referral agencies will be reaching out because one of their charges is to make sure that all of those that are eligible for these funds are completing the applications to receive them. So we'll pause there and go back to questions, but definitely those resources are available to you as well.
question, I'll give you this, Miss Judith. Questions are all over the place, so I'll do my best to try to make sure that. Can you use funds for mortgage in phase 2 if you used it in phase 1?
Absolutely. We just need to make sure that it's not for the same month. So if you use mortgage from your February 22, it doesn't appear in both phase 1 and phase 2. But if you're using different dates of those statements, you're good to go.
Can you utilize funds to turn a stone parking lot into a cemented one to make it more disability accommodating for wheelchairs, for example?
That one I'd have them send in to us just
Okay.
to make sure I'm understanding that.
Okay. If you used rent mortgage in phase 1 application, sent documents for 6 months to 2020, can you use 6 months of 2020 for phase 2 when applying for a dollar amount?
So when we go into phase 2, the expense periods roll forward. So the expense period for operating is July 1, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. And then the workforce recruitment and retention and access development roll forward a bit. So I would have them take a look at those dates to make sure that that's lining up in the appropriate phases.
If you change from FCC type B to type A in between phases, does that affect your money?
So it would be the program that was in effect when the application opened. And then in the new phase, which the next phase, phase 3, would start July 1, then potentially that you would move to the new program then.
Yeah, our FCC people our FCC employees considered an employee. It just isn't.
Yes.
Okay. Is indoor gross motor allowable since playgrounds are allowable?
Specifically, playgrounds are called out there. So the others, and there's, I'm guessing that based on the question, it would be things that would be, inside type items that's not included in these funds.
Okay. Question about getting a new fence.
Yes, that would be included in playground.
Okay. Interactive whiteboards. Is it
So
not be included?
And we've utilized the term smart boards, if that is what they're asking about, is included.
Okay. Can I submit one document for expenses at multiple sites such as payroll?
Yes, that is possible. As we've mentioned, you could have multiple sites referenced on a document that's provided to us. We would just need to make sure that an allocation or description of how much applied to each program is provided.
Okay. Another comment about just making sure that they're going to be able to get their funds from phase 1 to phase 2, and making sure that they're able to still be able to access those.
Sure.
And whether or not will there be like a delay or something like that because of maybe they're waiting on funds?
Not currently, but we'll definitely keep an eye on if they don't receive their funds. Like I mentioned, I would say, I would give it up until 8 weeks. If you haven't seen it, definitely call into us to make sure what's going on with that.
Does Ohio have plans to do? So on the call last Thursday with the administration for child and families, other states and other regions providing child care centers with monthly stabilization payments, utilizing the ARPA funds. Does Ohio have any plans to do this, or any plans to release more substantial funding relief that they have up to this date?
They will continue with the stabilization grants. And so we know that we have the MPL for phase 2 and 3. And then as referenced in that MPL, there will be a phase 4. And so that's how our state is implementing those ARPA funds for programs.
Someone asked, is there a specific time frame to spend funds for phase 2 and 3?
Yes. And so in the MPL document, as well as the phase 2 guidance document for applications, it provides what those ranges are.
It looks like someone's already been approved they're applying for phase 2. Do you know what the turnaround for phase 2 will be approximately for getting reimbursement?
That is the same. So approximately that 4 to 6 weeks. We provide invoices for both phases to JFS. So we continue to move those payments. Yep.
Someone's asked about a small deck built mostly for non-walking special needs children to be used on the outside. Is that something that might be allowable?
I'd have them take a look at that structural piece.
Okay. Shelves, would shelves be allowable?
Shelves and storage are not in this particular case.
Someone says, I am confused about how family childcare programs would allocate for increased wages. How would you show reconciliation with the funds to reflect this?
So specifically for increased wages, if you could provide us with information about what the wage was prior, and this would be the same for all settings, providing what the wage was prior and what you're going to essentially increase the wage to, that difference is what could be applied for the increased wages in workforce recruitment and retention.
Are rugs and cots covered in the access grant?
So it is dependent upon which activity you are implementing. So if you are reopening classrooms and that expanding of classrooms for infant, toddler, school age children with special needs, there's a list of activities and materials, goods that are available for that, and that could be there. But of course, you have to be completing that activity to be able to use it in that way.
Approximately how long does a desk review take before approved? Are we able to apply for phase 2 while waiting for the desk review to be completed?
Right. The review and the approval process does not factor into your ability to apply for phase 2. You just have to submit the reconciliation, and then you'll be able to see the ability to add phase 2 application in your applications tab.
Someone's planning to expand to some full day classrooms. They're currently only half day program. Can they use that to purchase cots?
Yes, as long as we're working within the specific age groups. So infant, toddler, school age, and children with special needs, those particular areas.
Someone's asking about clarification on light tables. Is that something that might be included in technology for infants and toddlers?
The light table is allowable in technology access.
Someone's asking about, they have multiple computers that need batteries to be replaced.
Yes, that is fine.
Someone's asked again about the outdoor playground.
Yes, playground is included in the facility maintenance and operating subgrant.
Is there a list of approved items?
The guidance document, and it's the application and the reconciliation provides this as well, is providing those expenses and then the activities related to that. So that is what we're providing for those allowable items.
If you've submitted your application, when will you be able to see a phase 2 application on OCCRRA?
So once you submit your reconciliation, in the corner of your applications chart, you'll see a green button that says add February 2022, which is phase 2.
I think you've answered this. Can you use funds to rent utilities for rent utilities payroll only as long as it's in different phases?
So you can utilize Utilities in all phases. The type of expense can be in all phases. It's just what you are, the time period that you're applying that. So you can't use, because phase 1 and phase 2 are the only ones that overlap. You can't use the same time period in those phases.
I have 2 new infants. Can I buy pack and plays and being reimbursed?
So I would have them take a look at that increasing classrooms portion in access development, because that would be allowable if that activity is being completed.
Installing a water fountain with a water filter or a bottle filler. I'm sorry, I read it wrong.
So I would have them take a look at the, yes, the concept of that would fall in the touch-free, and there's touch-free faucets in the facility maintenance, that would be included.
Okay. Cases like OtterBoxes for kids' iPads.
Yes, so the covers for the tablets are included.
Okay.
For the safety of the equipment.
When someone's asking about information about uploading documents for reconciliation, is there, can you maybe explain that more in detail? Or is that, yeah, go ahead.
So when selected for a desk review and you receive that notification, you'll go back to your applications tab, and in that chart, it'll say the application, it'll say the reconciliation that you provided. You'll click on the reconciliation to open that document. At the bottom of that page, there'll be an upload. It'll say uploader at the bottom, and then you'll be able to click upload. It'll take you to your file manager on your computer, and then you can add the files that you wish to upload to that document. Then once all the files you wish to add are included, then you can click submit, and that will send those documents to our review team.
Someone has Dutch doors or like half doors. And now due to COVID, they'd like to get full-size classroom doors to isolate germs and exposure. Would that be something that might be allowed?
Yes, the doors for that purpose that were used in the child care area, yes.
Okay. Purchase of a school age transportation van.
Transportation is not included with these funds.
iPads, Chromebooks for students in the classroom.
Yes.
As well as preschool.
Yes.
If something isn't approved, do we need to pay the money back?
If it's not allowable, that may be a situation where funds would need to be repaid.
Okay.
But we will work with you as far as replacing that item with one that is allowable within the expense period.
Someone mentioned replacing appliances. Is that something that's allowable?
There are specific appliances that are listed, so I would have them reference the personal protective equipment. That provides the ones that are included. And that's in the operating subgrant.
I think that catches up with everything. If I missed your question, please like resubmit it so that Judith can have a look at it. Are there special processes for purchasing equipment exceeding $5,000?
There is not. Not designated by these funds. Your organization may have a process for that, but that does not need to be provided to us.
I've got a question. If I don't know the answer, which I probably don't, and you know the answer, who should I send that person to in order to get a good answer on how to help them with either the grant, applying for the next phase 1, phase 2, reconciliation, or whatever? Who should I have them talk to?
So I would have them look at the support at OCCRRA.org, because that's kind of our avenue to have our team review that. We have a few folks, it provides us it's in a ticketing system, if you're familiar with that. So each request becomes a ticket, and then we work those through. So that's your best process to get that answered.
And I know that some of the 4C coaches are at least getting some of those questions. So I just want to make sure. I want to reopen a preschool room and need to purchase classroom educational items. Would that be covered?
So the reopening classrooms is specifically for infant and toddler, school age, and children with special needs. So in this particular case with preschool, that would not be allowable.
Can you tell us again where the list is of things that are approved or allowable?
Sure. The exact same list appears in 2 documents. So one is the application guidance document. And so on our website, there's an application guidance document for phase 1 as well as phase 2. And then the reconciliation guidance document has the exact same list in it as well. And that's your best bet to have that. So I would refer to those. And definitely if you have questions after you've taken a look at those, that's when, asking support and saying, hey, I've looked at the guidance document, but here is my additional question, is very helpful.
So I'm not sure if I'm sharing the right thing or not, but I think this is what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. So this page, again, provides the MPLs for the JFS guidance, and that will be, of course, continue to be added to as we receive those. And then we have the phase 1 application guidance document and user guide, the reconciliation guidance user, and then the phase 2. So again, following that same kind of concept, all of the user guides are those screenshots in the OPR about the step-by-step of how you're going to complete the process. And the guidance documents are typically that deeper dive into the rationale behind terminology, things of that nature, allowable expenses.
So something that I missed, at least I guess I missed a couple times. If they submitted maybe late December or January and they still haven't heard about their funds yet, is there something that they should be doing in order to find out what might be going on?
Again, I would say if it's based on approved dates for one. So if you were approved in, again, that late December, I would definitely reach out to support@OCCRRA.org and we can follow up on that. But it's based on the approval date, not the submitted date. So you can see your approved date in the applications tab of your organization dashboard.
Then someone's asked about digital cameras, whether or not those are allowable.
Those are not.
Can funds from this subgrant be used for currently provided healthcare benefits or only for new benefits?
For currently provided, I would put that into the operating piece.
Okay. And then someone's asked with family child care whether or not someone can pay themselves.
Yes, so all the personnel and operating, as well as the workforce recruitment and retention, family child care can participate and essentially, as this suggests, pay themselves for those activities. It's just a matter of having that documentation to support what activities selected. Also with the retention bonus component in workforce recruitment and retention, that will also be in play for family child care. So the agreement that you're essentially signing to provide the additional 6 months of service would need to be completed.
I think that is all of the questions up to now. So unless someone else has got more questions, we thank you so much for your time today, Judith.
No problem. I appreciate being here and appreciate everyone working through this process. And definitely, if we can answer questions, don't hesitate to ask them.
Can you share again the email for everyone? It's support at
OCCRRA, OCCRRA.org. And I can put that in the chat as
That
well.
would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Judith, I want to thank you for all of your hard work on these grants. You know, this is a massive project, and the significant amount of work that you and your team are putting into ensuring that these programs around the state receive the funds that they desperately need is recognized and really appreciated. So thank you from SWOAEYC as well.
Thanks, Chad.